We don't clean up communities just to keep America beautiful. We clean up so Americans can do beautiful things. Every year, we clean up hundreds of millions of pounds of litter and recyclables, plant hundreds of thousands of trees, flowers, and gardens, and deliver $236 million in measurable benefits. We keep America beautiful so Americans can do beautiful things.
Welcome to Do Beautiful Things. I'm your host, Jenny Lawson, President and CEO of Keep America Beautiful. In this podcast, we'll discuss ending litter, the truth behind recycling, and making communities beautiful for people and for a more sustainable future. We'll be talking to industry experts, community leaders, and everyday people who want to do the right thing, including from time to time, my mother. Thank you for joining us. I hope you learned something, and I know I will. Welcome back to Do Beautiful Things. I'm Jenny Lawson, President and CEO at Keep America Beautiful. Spring is here, and across the country, gardens are blooming and planting season is in full swing. And this year, we're challenging ourselves and you to think bigger about how you can be a part of this blooming season. It's the perfect time to consider how every tree, every flower, and every choice you make in your yard and at the garden center can help protect and restore the ecosystems around us. Last year alone, Keep America Beautiful planted over 350,000 plants and trees through our affiliate network around the country. And as part of the Greatest American Cleanup, we're inviting everyone to plant native this spring, helping to build a more resilient, beautiful America by the time we celebrate our country's 250th birthday next year in 2026. That's why we've invited today's guest, a leading expert with decades of experience, to help us understand how to plant smarter, choose the right native species for our neighborhood, our climate, and the wildlife that depends on them. This is where real change begins. So let's get started. Today, I'm delighted to have as my guest Dr. Doug Tallamy, professor, author, and one of the leading voices in conservation. Doug teaches at the University of Delaware, where he spent over 45 years studying how insects and plants shape the health of our ecosystem. Many may know him as the co-founder of Homegrown National Park, a grassroots movement to restore biodiversity in our own yards. He's here today to show us how small changes at home, whether that home is in the country, in the city, whether it's an apartment with a balcony or a tiny backyard, that there are big wins that each of us can help create for Mother Nature. Doug, welcome.
Thank you, Jenny. Very wonderful to be here.
We had spoken before. You spoke at our national conference a couple of years ago, and it is a conversation that is still resonating within our network and with our conversations, because pathways to improving life for the butterflies and the bees they're possible. And you help us to see those in ways that may not be so obvious. So thanks so much. How did you get started in this work? What was that moment where you saw your path and passion?
Well, of course, I'm an entomologist. I was trained in graduate school. Everybody says, well, why did you start liking insects? I took a course. I took a course in entomology, and it was fascinating. But what really channeled me in this direction, because before this, I studied insect behavior. I was a behavioral ecologist. How did cucumber beetles choose their mates? Things like that. Interesting questions, but nobody cared about that. In the year 2000, my wife, Cindy, and I moved into our current home in Oxford, Pennsylvania. It was part of a farm that had been broken up into 10-acre lots, and it was thoroughly invaded with plants from Asia. So first step was to address that problem. That was my introduction to the seriousness of invasive plants. I recognized right away that our native insects are not eating those plants. And if we don't have insects, you don't have breeding birds, and the whole food web collapses. And I hadn't been thinking about any of those things. So that was the aha moment, just moving in and walking around saying, hey, this is a huge problem. Not only that, it was a huge problem nobody was writing about. So that changed the direction of my research, and we started to measure how big a problem it was, what actually happens to the food web, how much are insects ignoring non-native plants, how big is the invasive species plant problem, and all of that has come together in several books at this point, because the solution is going to happen on private property, because most of the country is privately owned, and that means we've got to educate the private property owner. We do have parks and preserves, and they're doing the best they can, but most of the land is privately owned, so we've got to educate the property owner, and that's what I've been all about.
Let's see what we can do in our time together today. So what I hear you saying is not all plants are created equal and are equally beneficial to our health and well-being and that of our animals and bug friends. So why not?
Well, right. All plants do photosynthesize. They capture energy from the sun. They turn it into simple sugars and carbohydrates, and that's the food that drives the food web, but only if they share that food. That means something has to eat that plant. That something is typically insects. Most vertebrates don't eat plants directly. They eat the insects that ate the plants. So that's the vital connection there. And caterpillars are more important than any other type of plant eater. And that's because they're transferring more energy from plants to other animals than any other type of plant eater. So if we design landscapes that don't have a lot of caterpillars in them, you've got failed food webs and eventually failed ecosystems. So this is where plants really differ. They are very different in their ability to support caterpillars. And that's because plants don't want to be eaten. They want to capture the energy from the sun and use it for their own growth and reproduction. So they protect their tissues with nasty chemicals. And only the caterpillars that are good at getting around those defenses can actually eat a particular plant. So in order to do that, they develop very specialized adaptations, specialized enzymes and behaviors and life histories that allow them to get around those defenses, which is why the monarch butterfly can get around the toxic nature of milkweeds. But in order to do that, it has specialized on milkweeds. It hasn't figured out how to get around any other defenses, and it is now locked into eating milkweeds. And 90% of the insects that eat plants are host plant specialists, just like the monarch. So if you take away the native plants that our insects have specialized on and replace them with crepe myrtles or burning bush or hostas or ginkgos or any of the other things we typically landscape with, our insects have not specialized on those, and they support very few insects, and the food web collapses.
So we want bugs to eat our plants? As a gardener, that's a hard one to hear.
Yes, we've been trained in the other direction, but that's because we've thought that all plants are just decorations. Because they are decorations. They're beautiful, but they have critically important ecological roles too. And if we take away those roles, if we only use them as decorations, we're destroying ecosystem function every place we do that. And since humans are everywhere doing that, that's a lot of places. So we are on this planet because of the life support that healthy ecosystems provide. But we need that life support everywhere, not just in little parks and preserves. And that's kind of a new idea. It means we've got to redesign our human-dominated landscapes in ways that support life, that help the pollinators, help food webs, manage the watershed, sequester carbon, do all those things right at home. And the trick is, how do we do that and still make those landscapes beautiful? We can, but it takes a little bit of different thought to do that.
Let's go down that path. How should we think about this? What's the opportunity?
Well, 44 million acres in the U.S. is in lawn, manicured lawn, which is an ecological deadscape. So lawn, we do that because lawn's a status symbol and because it's easy to keep neat, and we like neat. But that's an area bigger than New England that we have just eliminated light from. We can't afford to do that anymore. So my recommendation is to think about reducing the area of lawn you have, not get rid of it. It's still the best plant to walk on. It's still a cue for care. It still does accent landscapes in very beautiful ways. But we don't need 2 or 3 acres of lawn that we have to mow every week. So how do you put plants into those spaces, maintaining the lawn as a cue for care? That's the challenge. And it depends on where you live. But the easiest thing is to start putting some trees into your yard. The right trees, the ones that are going to support the most caterpillars, put beds under those trees, line them with the lawn. The beds are really what's going to help reduce the area that's in lawn. So the bigger the bed, the better. These are gardening opportunities, but the problem is most people don't garden at all. So what we really need to do is have a trained, it's a new profession called ecological landscapers. Instead of hiring the lawn service, you're going to hire the ecological landscaper who can plant these trees, who can maintain them, who can put the beds in, who can put the proper plants in those beds. know what to do with the leaves when they fall.
You know, it's interesting. I've been almost to the date CEO here at Keep America Beautiful for 3 years now, and so had to move to do that to further north, a colder planting zone than where I had been in the DC area. And some of the most valuable time that I've had is walking around with them and learning about what to plant where. We're working on decreasing the lawn and adding more pollinators and adding them along beds where there's sort of woods behind us, so that you really start to get this, equally beneficial experience. But they still drive by and they're like, oh yeah, that's the CEO of Keep America Beautiful. They want it to look neat when somebody drives by, right? So what I've learned is it's possible. And what you get, the benefit from it, is just tremendous.
The formality of your landscape is a function of the design. It's not a function of the plants in the design. And we have to remember that our native plants are used in formal landscapes in Europe every day. They love them over there. So if Europeans can love our native plants, we can too. We can do it formally. We can have very productive landscapes. We just haven't been thinking that way. That's all.
Yeah. Let's talk about oak trees. I have more oak trees than I know what to do with here. Why does that matter? Why is it important?
Well, let's say you're a chickadee trying to feed your babies. You need 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to get one nest of babies to the point where they leave the nest.
Wait, 6,000?
6,000 to 9,000. And then after they leave the nest, you continue to feed them caterpillars another 21 days. So it's really tens of thousands of caterpillars required to get you, a bird that's a third of an ounce, to independence. Where are those caterpillars going to come from? Well, if you want chickadees to breed in your yard, they've got to come from your yard, because chickadees and most birds forage very close to the nest, about 50 meters from the nest. So you've got those oak trees. That's where they're coming from. Oaks in this country, oaks in the mid-Atlantic states, for example, you're in Connecticut, I believe, support 557 species of caterpillars. Huh. They support over 950 species nationwide. It is a top producing genus, so there's no plant that you can use in your yard that is going to produce more caterpillars than oaks. Now you have to, you got to be ecosystem specific there. You don't want to plant oaks where they don't belong, but where they do belong, they're number one.
So milkweeds, oak trees, the milkweed is actually gorgeous, right? If you can let that be in the garden, it's just so cool. It all the way through to November, it adds interest to the lawn. It sort of fills in and to the garden, it fills in really interesting ways. So, after listening to you speak, I've got a whole milkweed kind of everywhere, and I throw the seeds, and we'll see what Mother Nature does at the end of the year every year. And the oak trees, were granted to me here, but I know I'm very fortunate in that way. So talk a little bit about what those people who are living in a more urban environment, who maybe only have a patio or a little plot of land at their townhouse, or they're renters, right? So you talked about needing to educate homeowners. Can a renter get in on the native action?
Well, a renter is probably going to have permission from the owner, but a lot of them say, sure, just, as long as you take care of it. You're right. 82% of us live in cities, and the properties are either very small or they have essentially no property at all. One of the properties I highlight in my talks is Pam Carlson's in Chicago. She has 1/10 of an acre, and her property abuts O'Hare Airport. So she is an urban situation, but she's a native plant landscaper. It's a beautiful landscape, and she's recorded 127 species of birds that have used that landscape.
Next to O'Hare Airport.
She butts up against it, right? But if you have let's say you just have a patio or a front porch, you can do container gardening. We've recognized that this is a real missed opportunity. If you picture a typical apartment complex, it's a pile of bricks. But if you put plants on every one of those balconies, it becomes a valuable resource to urban bees. And there's a lot of species of bees that will live in urban situations if they have enough pollen and nectar to make it through their life cycle. It's also can be an important resource for migrating monarchs. These insects get around, so it doesn't matter if you're on the 5th floor. They will fly up and find it. So if you go to our website, homegrownnationalpark.org, there is a section on that website that tells you exactly what native plants are best in containers in your ecoregion. yeah, now we know, we know what to put in the containers, and the more containers you have, the more effective you will be.
So I assume in that same vein that green roofs also have that same function in the ecosystems, because I've seen more and more of those across the country.
They can, but they're a little trickier. You probably have to own the building. The problem with green roofs, the challenge with green roofs, is that you don't have a lot of soil. You can't have 3 feet of soil there because it just gets too heavy. So they have to be very shallow rooted plants. And then if you have a wintertime, there's no frost-free zone there. So you have to have very specific adapted plants. So it's certainly not something a renter is going to do. It's much easier to put a plant in a pot. In a pot, you really can have 2 feet of soil without a big deal. So yeah, green roofs are good, but it really takes a specialist to do that.
As we think about the future of insects around the U.S. and around the world, I've heard statistics that are pretty grim. Can we turn this around?
Oh, absolutely. The beauty about insects is that they reproduce quickly. All we have to do is give them what they need and stop killing them. So we have to identify the many ways we are killing them. And a primary way is our light pollution at night, particularly the moths that create the caterpillars that run our food web. We have lights on everywhere, and we do it from habit, not because it's really necessary. If we're really concerned about security, you can put a motion sensor on your security light. So it only turns on when the bad man comes, which means most of the time it will be off. Or even easier, take the white bulbs that we use for security lights and replace them with yellow bulbs, either yellow incandescent or LEDs. LEDs work the best, actually. And that's because yellow wavelengths don't attract nocturnal insects. So just with that simple switch, you can save millions of insects. And we all did it. We could save millions of dollars, too, if we used LEDs. So that is a really, really serious environmental problem that has a really, really simple solution. And we take advantage of those.
And that doesn't require you to own your house either, right? Like many, many people can just make sure that patio light, that back porch light, that balcony light is that yellow LED and put a motion sensor on it. And those I've seen, you can get them at Home Depot and it can just stick. And if you move out, you take it with you, right? Like there are really easy solutions to get that change happening at your house, regardless of what that looks like.
These types of changes that are really effective that the individual can do are empowering. We look at the statistics, we've lost 22% of our butterflies just since the year 2000. 3 billion breeding birds gone since in the last 50 years. We've got global insect decline. If there's things that the individual can do to help turn that around, you become part of the solution, a very effective part of the solution, and not just part of the problem. And when we do that, we feel good. We're helping it. It really does turn our day around. So that feeling of empowerment to start to solve some of these problems instead of just read about them, it's very strong.
I think you're exactly right. We work with Harris Polls, who provide us with a chance to talk to the American people about things that we're interested in a couple of times a year. And people are interested in being part of a solution, and they are looking for that way to feel somewhat optimistic about what's happening in the world. And these are really super easy things, right? Like, so my little list, as you've been talking, I have milkweed and oak trees. Think about light pollution. So change those bulbs to yellow, certainly yellow LED being the optimal. And think about, is there a way to put those on motion sensitivity rather than always on or something like that, to really provide an environment that'll let the insect and the accompanying animals that find them have a pathway to success.
Exactly. Way back in 1987, E.O. Wilson told us insects are the little things that run the world. And if they disappear, life as we know it will change. And that's because pollinators are pollinating 90% of our flowering plants. If they disappeared, those plants would disappear. It would drastically change the food web, the energy flow through our terrestrial ecosystems. So we would lose our vertebrate animals. If we lost our decomposers, the earth would rot because we wouldn't have, all you have is bacteria and fungi that do it very slowly. Those are drastic changes, all because of the presence of insects. And humans wouldn't survive the loss of insects. So this constant warfare, the use of neonicotinoid insecticides when we don't need them, just because they're cheap and easy, It's killing everything out there, and very serious consequences. We got to stop that. We really do.
Thank you for giving us a little bit of insight into how we can stop it. We, the individual, no matter if you live in the city or like you and I, a little further out in the country, that there are those of us who can do bigger things and those of us who can do smaller things. But when we each take an action, there can be a pathway to change.
Remember, there's a lot of us out there. There are millions and millions and millions of us. And you add it up, it adds up to a huge change.
Doug, can you tell us again how to find more information about how to do this? Share your website one more time.
homegrownnationalpark.org. A lot of information on that website. And if there's something you don't find there, let me know and we'll put it up there.
I love it. I always look forward to a chance to catch up with you and the work that's happening around native plants and protecting our insects and wildlife. So thank you so very much for joining us, and look forward to working with you to keep doing beautiful things.
Well, thank you, Jenny.
Thanks again, Doug, for sharing your insight and helping us understand how planting native can make a real difference in our own backyards. I can't wait to see how my native plants will serve this year. For more information about Doug's Homegrown National Park, you can visit homegrownnationalpark.org. I've been there. It's full of great resources and materials to help you decide what to plant based on your area of the country, the type of building you call home, and the ways that plants need your support in your community. This episode is part of our Greatest American Cleanup Spring Initiative to inspire Americans to think native this season. We're encouraging everyone to pledge to do their part, keeping our natural environments clean, green, and thriving for all to enjoy, from the bees to the trees to the people who share these spaces. To learn more and make your pledge to the Greatest American Cleanup, visit us at kab.org/greatest or consider making a donation to kab.org/donate. So until next time, take care, plant native, stay informed, and let's keep doing beautiful things together. See you in the next episode.